From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
This is, I know what we're doing a lot in this episode today is we're alluding to a lot of things that we're going to explore, and that's because we already have to set up and present that there was a genuine conspiracy. People were, by hook or by crook, cowed into silence for a long time. One of the questions that I had, to your point about circling the police cars there, is how much, if any, influence does Doris Duke's estate have on the city of Newport after her demise? And I ask that because sometimes in some cases like this, when very well-to-do people are able to pay off or to keep a secret, then once they have passed away beyond the reach of human justice, then things start to come out. But this just didn't. It stayed, like, as you were saying, it stayed something like a bit of local lore for a very long time. So was there some power or influence from the Duke estate that continued to power this cover-up, or what happened? Was it supposed to just fade into history?
Well, it's a great question. It's the question I'm going to seek to answer in my next book. My next book will largely cover the new witness that came forward, the reinvestigation that was opened in July, the tortuous 5-month investigation wherein Jackie Weiss, the detective, who's the cold case detective, by 10 weeks after the fact had not even read my book, which was what prompted the witness to come forward after he'd read the book. And it's not an ego thing, but it's just she began to turn. And it's on my website, peterlance.com. I have a timeline that I created of this latest investigation and where it went wrong. Just factual, not opinion, just straight facts. And basically, they ended up concluding that not only did they conclude there was no evidence, which is like one city council member called it an embarrassment that they would reach that conclusion, but they also decided that they'd embrace this original accident theory, which was corrupt, as I prove in my book. So the answer is that I think inherently many police departments that have cold case detectives don't really want to solve the cases because they're embarrassing, that for the reasons we just talked about, right? Or they just can't admit fault. As to Doris Duke's power, that is something I'm going to explore. The Newport Restoration Foundation is a $75 million foundation, nonprofit, that runs Doris's Rough Point Museum, the home, as a home museum, and also still owns like 75 or so restored colonial houses and rents them out for $5 million a year or so in income. And they employ probably 100 people or maybe more with their extended families, that people are in the business of like the Doris Duke philanthropic legend, which they want to continue to perpetuate. And then there's other people in Newport, some on Bellevue Avenue, although a number read my book and were like, right on, brother. You know, they didn't say it that way. Oh, that was quite good. Yes, quite good. Yes. In other words, there are certain elements in the town, and this is what I'm going to get into. Part of what reason I'm doing a follow-up to this is I want to know that. I want to answer that question. It's a great question. How is it that Doris died in 1993 at the age of 80? She had a two-thirds of a page New York Times obituary, even more in the LA Times where she died. And there was one sentence, 34 words devoted to Eduardo Torrella's death. Arguably one of the most important events in her life, and there was one sentence devoted to it. Today, now, here's the larger question. The Doris Duke Charitable Foundation is her major foundation based in New York. Guess who? And I'm not impugning him because I love the man. I think he's a hero. Anthony Fauci is like vice chairman of the board of that. The wife. It's
also like NPR. You hear it on NPR constantly. Brought to you by the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation.
Yeah.
I'm like, where have I heard this name before? That's where. Holy shit!
And they give out hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants, many to the state of Rhode Island. So people, look, you guys know we're never in the room when the deal is cut, right? We're not flies on the wall. We're never there so all we can do is try and put together the best portable version of the truth, as my old friend and mentor Carl Bernstein used to say. But in this case, you just have to consider what's out there. You know how they discovered Pluto, downgraded now from a planet, but they discovered it before they even had a telescope that was precise enough to discover it, because of the planetary alignment of other celestial bodies and how it fit in the solar system. Well, that's kind of what investigative reporters do. They try and piece together the truth, the best available version of the truth, from all of this stuff. So that's part of what I'm going to be looking at. And one of the biggest disappointments I had in this whole thing is the city manager, Joe Nicholson. Joe Nicholson's father was a lawyer, a wonderful man who represented my father. I trusted Joe throughout this whole thing. He's in charge of the police and fire departments. He, said that he was trying to help me find the missing police report at the time. And I really, during this whole police investigation would text him in the background, and he ended up completely dropping the ball on this thing when they just decided to close the case summarily on November 18th. And then after members of the city council were embarrassed about it, he then issued 2 additional statements. And the final statement he issued, it's all on my website, peterlance.com. He basically came up with this theory that only a lawyer could come up with. Well, because we could not get into the mind of Doris Duke at the time of the event, we're just going to embrace the accident. Now, I ask you, gentlemen, who cover murder cases all the time, right? Whenever is someone convicted of murder based on what is in the mind of the killer? It never happens. Why? Because of the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Almost never do killers take the stand, right? And the only way you can divine what's in their head is if you can cross-examine them in a court of law. And that was never the issue in this case. Because Doris was dead, nobody could be indicted, nobody could be arrested. So the city of Newport, when they took this on, the police department, when they opened the case, which Nicholson promised me they would see through, and the Jackie Weiss, the detective, said, we will not ignore this. We will find justice for Eduardo. That's her phrase. She asked for my help. We'll get into that later on, and maybe in the next hour. And all of a sudden, it's like the Iron Gate came down. Boom! And it's all like, okay, we're going to move on now. And I did an event in Newport on the 10th of December, the last big kind of book signing. I went back and like 100 people showed up. And people are like kind of outraged in the town that this is, it's my hometown. I'm ashamed that they would, do this. And there's been international publicity. The Associated Press did 2 stories when they opened the case and closed it. Over 5,000 media outlets worldwide, from the Washington Post to the Taiwan News, covered this. And that's kind of the record that Newport, Rhode Island wants to stand on. The Newport Restoration Foundation, the guardian of her memory locally, beyond, a nonprofit, by the way, it's $75 million. Their last 990 tax return showed that the top 5 officers had a combined salary and benefits of $750,000. That's 10% of the net worth of the foundation paid out in executive salaries, and yet they had given away, I think, $11,800 that year, which was 2018, the last year tax forms were available. So the point is, that's a little bit of a scandal in itself. They had never mentioned Eduardo in the 20 years of their existence. It started as a home museum, literally 2020 was the 20th anniversary. And yet, when they got news of my Vanity Fair piece was going to go, it was originally going to go in the summer of 2019, and then they held it for a year, and it was actually better. It was published in July of 2020. But as soon as they got word, at the end of the Rough Point tour, they have like an exhibit space on the second floor that changes every year. Like one year it's Doris's jewelry, Doris's clothes, that kind of thing. They always change it. Well, they started a wall-sized exhibit called The Accident at Rough Point, okay, and they basically had 5 affirmative falsehoods, the worst of which is that Doris settled with Torello's family during the wrongful death trial, which is a bold-faced lie, okay? And they said she was unfamiliar with the car, where that 3-page transcript, she says, oh yeah, I drove the car twice that day, So the bottom line is the Restoration Foundation itself and hundreds and hundreds of people visiting that museum in all of 2019, all of 2020, up to March of 2021 had seen that exhibit that was a lie. So I pressed forward, and Tarella's niece wrote a letter, and they finally changed accident to incident in the headline, and they dropped the final paragraph. Now, I haven't been back, or nor have I asked anybody if they've gone in since the police did the new cover-up to see if they've restored the word accident at the top of the exhibit, but it's still up there as far as I know. So they continue they removed the reliquary of St. Ursula for a whole year, claiming they were cleaning it. The gates of Rough Point were knocked down as a result of an accident in the fall of 2019, and as of last summer, June, they had a little cow fence in front of the estate. On the 20th anniversary of these, you'd think it's the 20th anniversary year, you want to have the beautiful gates up, but the gates are evidence. And just before my book went to press, I asked the guy to go in there, and he found the gates covered in a tarp over in the corner of the estate, which I have, pictured in the book. The point is, it's very ham-handed, but effective. The cover-up has many dimensions, and there's a physical cover-up and there's a legal cover-up going on right now to this day in Newport, Rhode Island. And I'm hoping, the hope I have with this podcast of yours, this celebrated podcast, is that maybe some people will, just get interested and want to see the truth come out.